Well, good day, everybody. Welcome to Save Los Angeles with Mike Netter and John Cruikshank. Everyone out there, there's lots to talk about. There's lots that can be done. There's lots that can be accomplished to save LA. And one of the things what we have to do is get some new government officials in, which is why every week we do this podcast with John Cruikshank, who's running for...
I'm running for Los Angeles County Supervisor in the 4th District.
Everyone out there, that's the 4th District. There are 5 districts, 5 supervisors. We have an option this time to elect 2 new ones. One of them definitely needs to be changed, and that's your opponent, Janice Hahn, right?
Well, actually, let me quickly correct you. There are going to be 3 of the supervisors that are up for re-election. The District 2 supervisor, Holly Mitchell, is also up for re-election.
That's why John's running and I'm not.
So, no, that's right. And so I'm, like you mentioned, 4th District, which is the southeast portion of Los Angeles County. Everything from Whittier down to Long Beach and across to my hometown of Rancho Palos Verdes and including the great city of Torrance.
That also includes Rolling Hills Estates.
It does.
And there's been lots of news lately about Rolling Hills Estates, hasn't there?
Yeah, a lot of negative news about Rolling Hills Estates. Of course, over the weekend, they unfortunately had land movement, landslide, and there's at least 12 homes, if not more, that are going to be lost.
And that's really kind of sad.
Completely.
John, it seems like, there's been a lot of appearances by some members of the Board of Supervisors kind of, taking opportunity with the photo ops. I'm trying to think of a polite way to put it, but not necessarily being proactive about what maybe could have been done or about what can be done for the people who are facing. I think it's up to, was it 16 homes now?
Well, I know that 12 have been red tagged, and there's another 10 on the watch list, and those 10 probably they might not make it either. So, no, it's an after the fact thing, and it's obviously it's important for people that are elected officials to make sure that they reach out to people that have such a devastating loss and be able to offer help. I think bigger point is that we want to be more proactive when it comes to our infrastructure. My city of Rancho Palos Verdes has the largest active landslide in North America in the Portuguese Bend area. It was a landslide that was actually activated when LA County back in the 1950s was trying to bulldoze and move earth for a extension of Crenshaw Boulevard all the way to the ocean. And they moved thousands of yards of dirt, and that activated the landslide. They never completed the road because they had to stop the work. Mm-hmm. And now we've been dealing with this movement, sometimes up to 8 or 9 foot horizontally per year as the land heads into the ocean. And we've been asking the county to help us with repair plans to slow this down. And we've had a real difficult time getting them to participate. So I appreciate the fact that our current supervisor, Janice Hahn, is out at Rolling Hills Estates and offering support after the fact. But there's some real problems that are going on all throughout LA County, and our expectation is that our Board of Supervisors are the ones that are getting the experts and listening to the experts in their cities and taking proactive steps so that we don't have issues like this occurring.
So this is a problem that apparently the county's kind of known about for a while, and now they're kind of running around. And again, no one can prevent a natural disaster, but I've said this about the state of California many a time. They need to be better prepared for natural disasters. And it just doesn't seem that we're prepared when things go wrong. John, one of the things you did was reach out to an insurance person today to maybe explain a little bit about the insurance woes and troubles that some of these folks go through. Do you mind bringing him in right now?
No, it'd be great. A friend of mine, Scott Carter, he's an independent insurance broker, and I think why this is so timely is that unfortunately, these homeowners probably do not have insurance to cover their losses. And one of the owners, I think, had only owned their home for a couple months, and now they've lost probably their biggest investment in their lives. So having Scott on to help explain, what is or isn't covered and what can be done in the future, I think was really helpful. So I think we invite him in. Scott?
Welcome to Save Los Angeles, Scott.
Thank you very much for having me, Mike and John. Thank you for the invite. Hope I can help. I've been an agent in the South Bay for close to 36 years now.
So this isn't a new job to you. So that's why John was smart enough to get a veteran on. Scott, I've been through my own personal natural disaster before. I've been open about that with my house burning down. But I didn't realize till we interviewed you before the show that some of these homeowners may not be covered by what just happened?
Yes, that's an excellent point, Mike. As an insurance agent or an insurance company, if you're a buyer, you want to hear what is and what isn't covered, and you won't remember after the first time it's explained to you. So it's important for an agent to explain that to you. If not every year, every other year, because there are situations that can make redecisions. You can make redecisions about, and in this situation, it is quite clear in the stated area in the policy coverages for most insurance companies. I always have to say that is that it's the land movement, landslide, earth movement is not covered. Just the same as earthquake is a separate policy.
And I find that fascinating, I guess, because I really didn't realize it. I knew about earthquakes, and John, tell me when you want to jump in here, because earthquakes, kind of the government sends me notices year after year after year with big, or they make the insurance company, big words on top, earthquake. But I've never seen a landslide notice living in the county of Los Angeles. Do they not normally do that, Scott? I understand it's with disclosures when people buy the place. Go ahead.
There are situations where landslide would be covered by two types of policies. And if there's an earthquake and it causes a landslide, then it's covered. Okay, if you have an earthquake policy, that is.
If you have an earthquake policy, got it.
Right. And the same thing with flood insurance. If you have flood insurance and it causes the rapid erosion of a hillside and causes a landslide either onto your property or under your property, then it's covered. But it has to be an active flood, and it has to be an active earthquake for those two policies to cover.
Scott, one of the things that I've been reading from one of the council members, Frank Zarunian at Rolling Hills Estates, he was mentioning that the geologists have been in. The jury is not out in terms of what they found, but some of the initial thoughts are that because we've had so much dry weather for so many years, that this year, with the unusual amount of wet weather and the extra saturation that ended up occurring in all around Los Angeles County, that might have actually aggravated this. So going back to what you're saying in regards to floods, that's not really a flood. I mean, when it's just raining prolonged, that's not considered a flood. So that wouldn't be covered, correct?
No, it wouldn't be covered. An example of that is up in Ventura, where they had a whole community with a landslide above them that was saturated with water about 3 to 6 months earlier, and it finally gave way 3 or 6 months later and buried like six or eight homes on the coast there. I forget the name of that community, but it's just past Ventura. But that is something that can happen.
Okay.
Well,
Scott, one of the things that I wanted to also talk to you about, and it's something that's becoming a bigger issue, is wildfire insurance, fire insurance. We need to have it for our homes, but some of these insurance carriers, Allstate, State Farm, and I even understand Progressive, are no longer taking on new policies for fire insurance. Our peninsula area, all 4 cities are in what they call a severe high fire safety zone. And so, right. So Can you tell us a little bit about what's going on with the insurance companies in regards to fire insurance?
In that situation, the insurance company of last resort is called the California Fair Plan, and it will cover fire, windstorm, lightning, of the basic coverage of a policy. And whereas that will be a basis for a policy for individuals. If they want to have complete homeowners policy, they would acquire from an insurance company a wraparound that would cover them for theft, robbery, burglary, water losses, etc. So that would be they essentially have to have two policies: one to cover for brush fire risk, and the other one to cover the rest of the coverage above the basic risk that we've covered under the Fair Plan policy.
Scott, let me ask you a question, though. I'm a little bit, I'm going to say confused. A lot of states have disasters, right? There's hurricanes in Florida, hurricanes in Texas, tornadoes in Kansas. California is obviously a big market for the insurance companies. And I want to ask you, as an agent who's been doing this for 36 years, there's one thing between State Farm raising its rates. Why is State Farm saying, you know what, we're not going to write any more policies in California? And although they dance around a little bit in the memo, they kind of talk about, well, it's kind of hard to do business in California. I mean, are you hearing that from insurance companies? What's the story behind that?
It is hard to do business in California because you have the office was turned into a political situation for the insurance commissioner some time ago. And prior to that, it was agreed upon between insurance companies and politicians on who would be appointed to be a insurance commissioner. Now it's a political office, so they want to appeal to the masses and to the politicians that want to manipulate the situation for their advantage. So they want to give away as much as they possibly can. And sometimes what they're trying to give away actually hurts the average homeowner more than they know. So, because if it hurts the insurance companies, you see what happens. They decide to say, hey, you know what? State Farm is the largest personal lines insurance carrier in the nation, and they decide to leave California as far as writing new business goes for property insurance, and they can do that. And that's called free market. You definitely don't want to force insurance. That's not a good marketplace to be in, forcing insurance. But there is a remedy, and you're not going to get as preferred a policy as you would from State Farm or Allstate or Progressive. Farmers Insurance now has limited their writing of home insurance to 7,000 policies for the year. So they are also limited on what they're going to do.
Scott, I have a question about this. And you're an insurance agent. So my concern is that I've heard Allstate and State Farm say it's because of global warming and that, but I don't think they're telling the truth and full truth in that regard. But you're actually an agent. How many times has our state government or county government officials come to someone like you or one of your groups and said, hey, we've got an issue here with these with your companies leaving our state? How do we fix it? How many times have they come up to you and actually worked with the insurance groups to figure out how to make it worthwhile to do business in California? Because in my city of Rancho Palos Verdes, we've got 25% plus senior citizens that are on a fixed income, and and as their insurance company either goes up quite a bit or is just dropped, they're going to have a problem. So I guess the question is, Scott, how often does our county officials or state officials come to your insurance groups and say, how do we fix it?
Well, They don't. They have their insurance workers in the Department of Insurance that are quite knowledgeable. They come up with their plans. But if you read a recent one that they came up with for solving the problem in California, I'm looking at it, and it's all platitudes that don't address the issues, but they're all saying the right things. So it's very confusing. It seems like they're doing something, but they're not. And yes, coming to an example of this is after the Northridge earthquake, there is a provision in insurance policies that unless you offer earthquake insurance as an insurance company, you cannot offer home insurance. So for 2 or 3 years until the issue was resolved, there was no home insurance being sold by Farmers, State Farm, Allstate. And that was back in 94 to 97. But it was resolved because the insurance commissioner at that time went to the insurance companies, about a dozen of them, and hobbled together a policy called Earthquake Authority. And that is available in the marketplace, and it is one of the largest insurance companies available that has financial guarantees from 12 different or 15 different insurance companies, as well as the state of California, for backing. And it has billions of dollars in reserves. So it's worked out so far.
So
even
that's
with all the other.
Yeah, so that's pooled risk, right? Where all the insurance
That
companies.
is a pooled risk, exactly.
So
So if you're talking about doing an insurance commissioner coming to the insurance companies and saying, can we do a pooled risk for this? I think it would be possible. I don't see why not.
And I guess that's a kind of a point I'm trying to understand. And by the way, they could do this in LA. They could do this in individual counties, right? Pooled risk doesn't have to be necessarily statewide.
It's pretty expensive, but it's possible to start something.
The reason I'm asking is this, because, much of the government is focused. We have a homeless problem. We must do housing first, and I get it. There's a reason to that. But how are they going to insure these places as the government shouldn't be in the insurance business necessarily, but without some kind of pooled risk plan with State Farm, farmers limiting their policies. You see where I'm going with this? Who is going to insure these structures once they're put up? And that's kind of my question. It might be expensive to do in portions of LA County, but it may be better than no insurance at all.
Right. If you're talking about a landslide risk, it is possible for government to reach out to insurance companies. Farmers Insurance is domiciled here in the San Fernando Valley.
Mm-hmm.
So they're as local as you can get. But the major companies have a major state headquarters here, like Allstate and State Farm, and Progressive, and quite a few others. It's something that could reach that the county could reach out to and begin a conversation.
Well, and it could have been done years ago. Now you're going back to when you're talking back in the 90s when we had the earthquake issue, and they ended up resolving that issue with a pooled resource for insurance. But like I mentioned, back in the 1950s is when they aggravated the landslide on the peninsula, and so in theory, they could have realized we could have pooled wildfire insurance. We could have pooled for landslide insurance. Now we're basically looking at 12 to 22 homeowners that are going to be out of pocket for everything. So not sure how that all ends up, and I hope they all somehow become whole again. But this is a nightmare for them right now. And so my discussion about being more proactive with infrastructure and seeing that there are these inherent risks. I mean, they said that this came out of nowhere, but it didn't really come out of nowhere. I mean, like people have mentioned, the names of these cities are rolling hills, and I know that it's because the hills look like they're rolling, but we've had landslide issues throughout the peninsula, and a pooled resource like for landslide insurance probably could have been a good idea, and maybe it is a good idea in the future. And I know it's easy to play Monday morning quarterback, and I don't mean to necessarily do that, but the hope is that we can utilize what the experts have probably been telling government officials for years, that there are issues, and I really hope that nobody dropped the ball on something, and what occurred is more of a natural occurrence. But my concern is that maybe we knew something before this happened.
Yes, and Palos Verdes isn't the only place. Central Coast California has had landslide issues, and so has Northern California in the south of the San Francisco area, and above the Marin County area too. So, and I'm not, and I'm certain that some places in the Sierra Nevadas have had some issues.
Well, Scott, thanks for coming on. We wanted to get you on today to kind of present the insurance aspect of it.
Thank you.
And we understand too, burglaries are up. I mean, frankly, if I was an insurance company, I'm not really sure, hey, LA's the place for me, right? Because you've also got to process things getting stolen out of cars, things getting stolen out of shops. All these have something to do with aggregate insurance rates, right? I mean, they go into the pool, correct? Risk?
Well, the insurance companies themselves are managing that with how they manage their losses, yes.
So I think a good way to put it, and Scott, I want you to correct me if I'm wrong, but the more they steal, the more we all pay in insurance. Is that fairly correct?
That's correct, Mike.
Okay. Scott, thank you so much for coming on. We will see you soon, I'm sure, at a meeting somewhere on the peninsula.
Thank you, Scott.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, John. Nice talking to you guys, and have a great day.
You got it. It's interesting, John. We talked about a little bit about this before we did this show today, because insurance is kind of a complicated issue. But again, it didn't seem like when it came to Rolling Hills Estates that the county did much from a proactive point of view. Maybe I'm missing something here, but you're telling me this problem's been around kind of since the 50s?
Well, the problem's been around in the Portuguese Bend landslide since the 50s, but of course landslides have been around forever. This particular area, I was not aware of anything. It's actually right near our city, in the city of Rolling Hills Estates, and no, this took everyone off guard. Ultimately, though, a lot of these times we were talking about there's more saturation of rain. Many of these landslides get aggravated by broken water lines, irrigation, and other water sources. In the case of Portuguese Bend, our repair plans basically talk about turning off the faucet first, so no more water comes in the bathtub, and then finding a way to make sure that the water gets pulled out of that bathtub before too much weight, in this case saturating the earth, ends up sliding on the bentonite and down into our ocean, which has been happening, like I mentioned, since the 1950s.
John, having started the recall of Gavin, one of my major complaints, full disclosure, if you're listening to this podcast going, I've heard this guy rant and rave before. One of my original problems with the state and the county of LA was the Office of Emergency Services. The state of California and, frankly, the county of Los Angeles have promised for a very long time they were going to be more proactive about it. And, frankly, whether it's a landslide, an earthquake, and or an airplane crash, and for everyone out there, this is kind of what a little bit we saw during COVID. COVID was kind of a slow tick emergency. Put the conspiracy theories aside, everybody going, well, it doesn't exist. Whether it did or not, it's not my point. My point, it was perceived as a disaster on a slow tick-up basis versus a landslide. The government didn't seem prepared for it. They were like, oh, my God, we better come up with a plan. The plan is we're just going to shut everything down. And this is what I'm asking about the county of Los Angeles. The federal government ranks states and they rank counties, and LA is ranked about every couple of years as most likely to have a disaster. To your point, we don't know what it's going to be. It could be an earthquake, it could be a landslide, it could be an airplane crash, but we have a lot of people. And it just seems like our county government, instead of just wringing their hands when something like this happens, or putting Barbara Ferrer out there, who's not a doctor, by the way, at least when it comes to
Infectious
diseases,
right.
which it was about, they ought to be a little bit more proactive, because we know with a lot of people, these kinds of things are going to happen. It doesn't seem like the county of LA has much of a plan for it.
No, I mean, this goes back to a lot of my rants in terms of, things that could potentially happen. Like, for instance, on the Palos Verdes Peninsula, we're a high fire zone. And we have a number of overhead wires that Edison has out there. And Edison calls themselves a above ground utility, which is a crazy name. It's just they're a power company, right? But they like to call themselves that because it's a lot cheaper to have above ground wires. And so we've been asking for undergrounding forever, and we just can't get that. And so I guess it's eventually going to take another wildfire where houses get destroyed and a bunch of land gets destroyed before somebody says, hey, we should have done something. And so that's kind of the point. And what happened in Rolling Hills Estates, I don't know if there were telltale signs before, if someone raised a red flag, but here's a real issue. Like back in Miami a couple of years ago, we had the collapse of those towers and people got killed.
Right.
And we then learned that there was a report written by engineers that were given over to the building owners that they had a problem. But the problem was really expensive, so they didn't do anything about it. They hadn't done anything about it. And then this tragedy occurred. And so our county supervisors saw that. Everyone saw it. The whole world saw this. And we have a number of high-rise buildings all throughout our county. We've got them in Marina del Rey. We've got them in Long Beach. We've got them in downtown L.A. and other places. What's happened since that occurred in Miami, in Los Angeles County? Nothing. Like, we haven't heard about buildings being repaired. So I guess we're potentially waiting for a disaster to occur there. And so the information's out there. Engineers and scientists are out there. And so if we know that geology is an issue on the Palos Verdes Peninsula, our cities want to work with the county to figure out where those issues are and stop them before they happen. And if water is the issue, then we need to be working with our water company, Cal Water, to make sure all those lines are being inspected constantly to make sure that there isn't an ongoing. It's not like it happens just overnight. Like, this land gets saturated and starts getting more and more saturated to the point of where it can no longer.
Then there's years where it dries out. We run out of water. I mean, we go through these cycles. We are going to have disasters, I guess is my point. And I want to have confidence that the government has a plan relatively quickly. And I want to, even on this podcast, I want to give you a real good personal example. The reason I wanted to talk about this issue today, and I don't get personal on these podcasts often, but these people had a 20-minute notice to leave their house. Now, for many people listening to this is a faraway thing, right? They're not in Rolling Hills. They go, hey, 20 minutes, I want you to get your arms around this. From a personal point of view, as I've talked about before, my entire home burned down in wildfires in 2007. We didn't have a lot of notice to leave our lives, okay? Literally leave our home within about 30 minutes. What struck me at the time, and again, this is 2007, but I don't see much improvement today, is there were these massive fires burning, and they were burning for a few days. Less time, actually, than it takes with the landslide to slide down. And the government of California, which is the one responsible for it, folks, not the federal government with the forest, was going, well, we should probably get some resources in there to stop them. In my neighborhood, which was in San Diego, the Alameda, yes, you heard correctly, everybody out there, fire department was called down to protect my neighborhood. Bit awkward since they didn't know the neighborhood and it took them 3 days to get down there just to move the trucks. When it comes to things like Rolling Hills or the county of LA, and maybe the county board of supervisors has a plan. They seem to take years to get anything done, like the great plan they have for the metro, John, which has been about 5 years in the making, and we have high crime rates. But when it comes to these disasters, I need to know that the government can move quickly. 20 minutes, folks, isn't a lot of time. We will have disasters in Los Angeles County, right, John?
Well, I just want the audience to be clear, though, the things that I believe. I mean, I still believe that local governments are the ones that should be the first ones to understand their communities. And so in Rancho Palos Verdes, even though we've requested additional help from Edison and LA County for certain fire-type safety devices that they're putting up in other areas, we realize that they're not going to necessarily help us. And so instead of waiting for them to do that, we do things on our own. Like we're currently having a whole camera system that's an artificial intelligence camera system that's going to give us full coverage on the peninsula. So when there's smoke from a potential fire, that artificial intelligence, the camera focuses on that, picks it up, and then monitors it quickly. And if it looks like it's an increasing type of thing versus someone just cooking up steaks on a barbecue.
How many cities are doing that on the peninsula?
So Rancho Palos Verdes took the lead, but all 4 cities are participating. And we have a system that's going in place. We were supposed to have today.
This is fascinating. Go on.
No, it's a wonderful system. And the reason I'm wearing my city shirt today is because I was going to be a participant in the kind of the ribbon cutting of this Pano AI system that our city and the 4 cities on the peninsula have implemented. And so, going back to the things that we expect from our county, our Los Angeles County Fire Department is amazing, and they have amazing tools and resources and people, and so hats off to all that. But in the same sense, there's a lot of things that locally cities should have the responsibility for, and to monitor and to do the extra things necessary to keep its residents safe. So I don't expect LA County to do everything, but I guess my bigger point is, and one of the reasons I'm running and talk about infrastructure, is that I want the county to be more of our partner. Like I feel many times that our city is just kind of doing things in an island. And there's so many great things that LA County that is happening in all these different cities that LA County could be a repository to share that information. What are they doing in Whittier? What are they doing in the city of Malibu? It almost feels like our city always has to just go and get that information. And many times, like the fire safety this year, unfortunately, LA County Fire sent out notices to all of our residents. Our city council wasn't even aware that this was happening. They sent it out, and it basically said that everyone needed to clear cut 5 feet around their houses. And our residents freaked out, and we freaked out because we didn't know those notices were going out. And then when we contacted the fire department, they said, oh, actually, we're not going to enforce that this year. Well, you've just told everyone to do that. And there's probably people out there with a chainsaw right now doing that because they want to follow the rules. So there needs to be way better coordination between the cities and the county, and that because what you're talking about, fire safety, landslide safety, all these other things that are so important, it needs to be a coordinated effort regionally, and Los Angeles County government needs to be that coordinating agency.
Yeah, and let me be clear here. When I'm talking about the Alameda Fire Department and my personal disaster, the fire people did the best job that they could.
Sure.
What kind of frightens me as just an ordinary citizen is that people like, I'm going to pick on your opponent, sorry, John, Janice Hahn, backed the firing of a lot of police and fire workers because, they wouldn't take the vaccine and they won't get hired back now. And that sounds like a great political stance. But when a disaster happens, if you can have the greatest fire department in the world, if there aren't any people or fire people or the police or the sheriff are short, because it's not that easy. It's not like the 7-Eleven. You bring in somebody, they're trained in a day. This is what has worried me a bit. The fire department has said, look, the county has cut people. They're not allowing us to hire them back. You hear this a lot in the police department. And I get that the county goes, it's okay, you got a year, we'll give you the budget. But my point is, we don't always have a year because we don't know when these disasters are going to hit. That's kind of what I mean by disaster preparedness, where the county does control the purse strings and control a lot of the policies that have just happened.
Well, I believe that LA County Sheriff is 1,000 deputies short. I hear
Right.
that the City of Los Angeles, LAPD, is 1,000 officers short. And it's because our government officials and our elected leaders have not made it a good place for our law enforcement to work. And so, and our sheriffs and our police are a huge part of disaster policy
Right.
because we rely on them to be the ones to help us evacuate, to hold looters back. That unfortunately, there's people that take advantage of others when they're down and they have fires and earthquakes, and so we think of the fire department all the time when it comes to emergency disasters, but the sheriffs and the police department are equal partners in that whole thing, and we're short 1,000 in both of those major law enforcement bodies that we rely on in LA County, and it's our county supervisors and I guess City of Los Angeles council members that have been talking about defund the police. They've been supporting people like George Gascon, and so the whole thing just falls apart because now you don't have the adequate personnel. So when something does happen, Rolling Hills Estates had 12 to 22 homes, and that's a tragedy. But there's potential tragedies out there like major earthquakes that could occur where we're going to rely on them and they're not going to be there.
Again, I'm not trying to scare anybody, but be aware. And I want to give everybody a vision in their head that should scare them. Where I think, because we talk about crime and people think crime won't happen to me. I lock my doors. Maybe I practice the Second Amendment. I get it. But again, these disasters, like of which a microcosm is Rolling Hills Estate, can happen. I'm speaking, the reason I tell about the fire is it can happen. I never thought my house would burn. Never did. Million years. You don't leave your house, think you're going to come back. And I was blessed that there was emergency personnel to help us. When we talk fire department, you have a great point, John. I want to dwell on this for a couple seconds here. That this isn't about insurance. This is about saving people's lives. And I want to take everybody you can remember, and it fades a little bit in our memories, back to 9/11 in New York City. Okay? No one woke up that morning expecting 9/11 to happen. A tragedy beyond human comprehension. What's amazing about 9/11 is how the police and the fire department and everybody in New York, not the lives that were lost, but flowed to save the lives that they could. I want that same kind of preparation for LA County. I want to know my fire department and sheriff's department and police department are pretty fully stocked at all times, not just for criminal justice, but to make sure that not if, but when some big disaster happens, resources are nearby. And
Right.
that's the job of the supervisors.
Well, it is. And so I like to look at the 4 cities on the Palos Verdes Peninsula as kind of a microcosm of what LA County could potentially be in that regard, because we know that the 4 cities are in a very geographically different area. It's basically a big hill, 1,400 foot out elevation, sitting right on the water on the ocean, and there's one road that goes around the whole peninsula called Palos Verdes Drive. And so the 4 of us work together in regards to creating emergency zones and evacuation routes, and we're prepared for that. But if you look at Los Angeles County in a whole, yes, LA County Fire is amazing and our sheriffs are amazing, LAPD is amazing, but what's the plan for the whole county in that regard, and how is that being how is that going to be implemented? What do we know about it today? And does that ease anyone's fears, knowing that, we don't want to be clogging up all the freeways. The airports are probably going to be shut down. And so most of us are probably going to have to shelter in place. So when is that messaging occurring? That's something I'd like to see much more of in terms of the banner of infrastructure in public safety, making sure that everyone in LA County understands that there is a plan out there. And part of that plan sometimes is just to hang tight and stay where you are and, listen to radio or any type of, or your cell phones or whatever's still working, and be able to trust that whoever's telling you to do something is going to be the right instructions. And so we haven't been building up that infrastructure or trust in that regard. We have on our peninsula, but we're just 4 cities out of 88 cities in LA County. So we're just a bit of LA County.
And we just spread that kind of government. I want to be clear that, the city and the county and the state talk a lot about, well, we're taxing you, because that's their favorite thing to do, right?
Sure.
We'll just add a tax.
Of course.
And we've added a better cell phone signal so you can hear that the landslide headed to your house by cell phone. That's great. Thank you very much. But if we don't fund and keep funding and training on a continuous basis, I think is both our points, the emergency personnel to help us. I mean,
Well,
they've been funding communications with additional taxes, but cutting back on the people that are more than just about criminal justice. These are people that will save lives during disaster. That's a little bit of what Rolling Hills shows.
Well, that's right. I mean, you can't just it can't just happen tomorrow and we do it. I mean, there's always got to be training, and once again, our public safety personnel, they train all the time for different scenarios, and they're prepared for that. I think I'm not worried about them so much. I guess I'm more worried about just us as people living in the county and how we react during an earthquake or during a major event and how it's going to affect others. So you could have 20% of the people that are really prepared, but if the other 80% have no idea, then 100% are going to be in danger.
What worries me a little bit is the mantra that some of the supervisors have adopted of, quote, defund the police, we think of as criminal justice. And my point is, and we talked about this in previous podcasts, John, look, if something happens on the metro, where a metro derails or there's a disaster on it, God bless the ambassador. That's not the person I want coming to help my posterior. I need someone who is trained, in proper emergency procedures. And this cry of defund the police, which is kind of reverberated through portions of, shall we say, liberal government, isn't just about criminal justice, is my point. It's really about being prepared with personnel when a disaster happens. This is why we need to fund the police.
We need to fund the police. And I've heard this whole thing about the importance of the ambassadors, and I'm still not convinced of that. I mean, certainly what I hear is they've got walkie-talkies and they can call in for help.
Who are they going to call if there's nobody to respond? That's kind of my question.
That's it. And I guess the other thing I would ask is, whatever happened to just helping your fellow man? Like, I get it that you might not want to put a guy in a chokehold and end up, having a tragedy where a guy loses his life, and now the guy that was trying to help his fellow passengers, now he's been convicted, or not convicted, but charged with murder. Right. And so people see that and they're like, I'm not going to ever help anymore. And so, but at very least we could do is we could pick our cell phone up, or if there's some type of communication device on the train, we could pick the thing up and say someone's in danger or there's something happening here. Why do we need extra people to do that? Like, why can't we just, all of us, just help each other? You don't have to necessarily get engaged, but at least call for help.
And also, before we kind of roll to the end here, I want to make another important point that you made earlier that I don't want to glaze over, that we think of infrastructure as the building of a bridge or a big building, a big thing.
Right.
But infrastructure is really about the network that we lay to be prepared for the unexpected. And that's kind of the point we're trying to make here today, that our county board of supervisors, look, everyone out there, if you don't believe me, just look at COVID. Just look at what the supposed pandemic was, where again, this wasn't something by anybody's definition where, oh my God, you know, I'm not here to argue number of deaths, but thousands of people were not dying at once. And the government didn't seem very prepared for it. They should have had a plan in place to be prepared for the unexpected. And that's what I think you as a county board of supervisors, when you talk infrastructure, want to make sure, like you're doing on the peninsula, cameras watching for the unexpected, right?
Well, we've got 12,000 plus structures just in our city alone, and fire can start anywhere on that peninsula, and people many times are not home, or it happens at night when people are asleep. And so there's technology out there that engineering solutions that are out there that we can utilize. I think what happens is that we've got so few decision makers now, and they're listening to one group of people, the same group of people over and over again, and we're not listening to everyone. And if you start opening your ears up and listening to the world and what the world is doing, solutions are out there to make our lives better. And that's what I want to see our county board of supervisors do, is take great ideas and make our world better. If you listen to some of those supervisors, I was just listening to today's agenda, and just the complaint after the complaint, and the victimization of this and that. And of course, the people that own small apartments are bad people. They're all evil people. And now the county is going to pay for the lawyers so that people don't get evicted, even though they're not even paying their bills. So there's no repercussions in not paying your bills. You're the good guy now for stiffing the person that's had a building built for you and provides you shelter. Now that's the bad person. Mm-hmm. You got to end all this craziness. I mean, there's too much tribalism. There's too much separation. There's big problems out there that we need to solve. We talk about that, the core four here, the infrastructure, public safety, homelessness, and economic opportunity, and how they all play off each other. We need to look for solutions. We need to put all this pettiness, bickering behind us and save Los Angeles.
We do. And by the way, unfortunately, for better or for worse, it is that those people in Rolling Hills are all in it together. And I don't want to wait for a big disaster to have to bring the people of LA together. To your point, we can save Los Angeles by having different voices in government.
Yes.
And those different voices, which don't all speak from one side of the aisle, that opposition speaking together is what will help us save LA. John, how do we find you on your website?
Find me at johncruikshank.us.
And you'll find us next week back on KABC. Save Los Angeles. Let's save it together. Get John Cruikshank in office and help save LA.